Hey guys. Hey, hey, hey. Let me know if you guys can hear me all right. If I'm too loud, if I'm too quiet, or anything like that. Just got to make sure ahead of time because I'm using my mic for the first time and it gives me a lot of anxiety to use it. It sounds good. Thanks, Erin. All right, sweet. It's also one of those where you can mute it on the mic or the computer. So if I go quiet for too long, make sure you guys let me know. But I plan on only using the mute on the computer if I need it and not really touching my microphone at all. But I'll be able to next time I go live and show you guys like with my cam on, then I'll show you guys the mic. It's just the pretty rainbow one that changes colors as I talk. No, Floo's mom, I kind of am hoping not to, is my plan. But hey guys, welcome in, welcome back. Sorry I missed a week last week. But tonight we will be going over the Susan Powell case, which is a lot to take in. Just to state it very bluntly. It's something that, yes, I promise, Erin. It's a case that was like a lot in general, the case itself, but then everything that's come along with it, as well as the fact that Susan is still missing, plays a significant role in this, at least in my opinion, I suppose. So I've spent the last 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks or so. I had known about Susan's case a long time ago, probably while it was happening. It was the first time I ever heard about it. Hey everyone. Oh, yes. Thank you, Lokamai from Lokamai Life, for sending everyone this way. I appreciate it so much. Thank you guys. I do have Lokamai under my suggested channels, I think, under my channel, but I'll also put her in the description box after the live. So absolutely, Sally Mae. All right. So, like I said, I've known about Susan Powell's case pretty much since it's been happening. Hi, Mo. But I've known, actually, I was surprised at how much I actually knew of the little details regarding Susan's case. But then there was still a lot, obviously, that I didn't know. So over the last 2 weeks, I've kind of just locked myself in and been doing all of the research. I've been scouring the internet. Not only that, but I listened to the audiobook. Hang on, I'm going to make sure that I get the name of the audiobook right. So let me go to my Audible. And welcome in, everyone. Hi, Fissel. Hope you're doing good. All right. I listened to, here we go. Hang on. If I Can't Have You by Greg Olson, which is Susan Powell, her mysterious disappearance and the murder of her children, which also gives you guys kind of a quick little glimpse into what we're going to end up talking about today. Also, I did post my community post last week saying that I wasn't going to have a live last week because I'm going to be doing a deep dive into this case. And I think it was Thumb Thug had wrote on there and said, you need to listen to the Cold podcast. So I did. I would listen to all 18 episodes in the last week at 2 times speed. So anyone that has come near me in the last 2 weeks has told me I sound crazy because I'm listening to everything at 2 times speed. And even my mom's like, how are you able to take in what they're saying? And I'm like, you get used to it after a little bit. But taking all of that in, I've done all my research. I have my overlays made. Now, I will say this is going to be a little bit of a longer live. I have 35 overlays, but I do talk somewhat fast, especially when giving out information. Yeah, exactly, Erin. You learn to listen fast. But so first of all, I want to ask, how many of you are familiar with the Susan Powell case before we get started? Before I bring everything up and start sharing all the overlays and stuff like that. Grateful middle-aged cat mom, we were just talking about that. But someone else was telling me they were listening to me on 2 times speed, and I hate that. That sounds terrifying. Okay, so far you guys are. Now, do you guys know in depth about the case, or do you kind of just know the overview of the case? Okay. Um, really, Red Rock, what do you mean? 50/50, okay. You know the overview. Yes, in depth, okay. Are you from the area, Red Rock? Yeah. Local to you, okay. Well, please, anyone that does know this case, if I have forgotten anything, if I get anything wrong, please feel free to correct me in chat. I just ask that you do it politely, I suppose. And also, there is a lot of information regarding this case, and almost to the point where it's hard to do it all in one live. But I am going to give you guys most of it, and then I will be sharing a handful of videos as well. So yes, and then after this live as well, I am going to be making a donation to the Susan Cox Powell Foundation. So I will also keep you guys updated on that. And I suppose we can get started. So, usually when I cover a case, I like to focus solely on the victim, who they were as a person, introducing you to them, the type of person they were, so on and so forth. But for Susan's case, unfortunately, I do have to kind of tell you guys a little bit about her husband, Josh Powell, as well. Just because his upbringing and his psyche and everything like that plays into what potentially happens to Susan, and then in turn ends up happening to Charlie and Braden. And so I just think it's very important that I want you guys to know that I'm not doing this so that you guys get to know Josh, but I think that there's important parts of his history that play into the situation of Susan Powell going missing and so on. All right. So if you guys hear me, not only am I on my computer doing the overlays there, but I also have my notes in my notebook, so you'll hear pages. And then checking chat on the side. Let me make sure. No, thank you, Mo. I would rather not do that. Oh, I know. Tell me about it. All right, but I am still going to introduce you guys to Susan. So Susan Marie Powell, her maiden name is Cox. She was born October 16th, 1981 in Alamogordo, New Mexico, to her parents, Chuck and Judy Cox. She was the third of 4 Cox girls. So there was 4 daughters. She was the third born. Throughout her childhood, she kind of moved around a lot. She lived in New Mexico. She lived in Alaska. She lived in Washington. So it was kind of all over the place for a lot of this, of her childhood growing up. She was known from a very young age to be loving, loyal, outgoing, optimistic. Her family has said that she had a servant's heart. She was a member of the Church Jesus of Latter-day Saints. She was Mormon. She was part of the LDS Church, which I know that there have been a lot of cases that have had the LDS Church within them recently, And I'll say this one really doesn't have anything to do with it other than the fact that Josh Powell, who she ends up marrying, was also part of the LDS Church at one point, but then started to kind of pull away from that to the point where then it was a very negative outlook on the LDS Church from his eyes, but Susan was still very devoted to her faith. So, LFT, thank you so much for gifting a membership. Thank you. You're the best. And welcome to the family, Rock 54. So she was also known as the best mother. She wanted to do everything in her power to not only be the best mother, but to support her husband. She wanted to be a good wife. She was, like I said, very religious. And just a really good time. She was very open about everything. She was kind of just like killing it how it is. I finished listening, obviously, to the Cold podcast today. And there was a lot of like her coworkers and such that would be talking about how she was literally open to just talking about everything and was willing to just have a good time and just she would light up the room when she came in. So that's something obviously that we hear a lot, but when it comes to Susan, I do think that is the case. Hi, Merp. All right. So, unfortunately, we are now going to introduce you to Josh Powell. I've tried to find the worst picture of him. Yeah. Josh Powell was born January 20th, 1976. So as you guys can see, he was born in 76. She was born in 81. There was a bit of an age gap there. He was born in Puyallup, Washington, which I know I'm saying that wrong, but I've been listening to it in the podcast and in the audiobook, and I still can't seem to say it out loud. So that's how we're saying it. But yes, he had a very violent upbringing, not necessarily in the aspect of like they were violent to him, but more of he was very violent to his family. He was very abusive towards his family and the previous relationships that he was in. At a young age, he ended up going against the LDS Church. And there was just a lot to him growing up. Which now looking back at it, as well as when he would be not interviewed, evaluated before his death, that he would have sociopathic tendencies and such, which we do find out that his parents ended up getting divorced in 1992. So when he was a teenager, which he had a handful, yeah, right, Sally Mae? His dad is a real treat too. His parents got divorced in 92. Now, their dad did a very good job at alienating them from their mom and everything like that. Hey, Avery, I love you too. Thanks for being here. Thank you. Yes. Yep. Mo, I would agree. They all had issues, in my opinion, except the one sister. Yeah. Debbie is the one sister that seems to have gotten out and gotten onto the right side of everything, which is good. But after his parents divorced in 1992, he obviously decided to stay with his dad, as well as a lot of his other siblings. I want to say Alina, Johnny, Debbie, Michael. Who am I missing? Or is that everyone as his siblings? I think that might be everyone. But yeah, so he was very violent, like I said. He ended up threatening his mother with a butcher knife at one point. He had killed his sister's gerbils, and then after he killed them, proceeded to force her to touch the blood, which any of you guys that are somewhat familiar with killers or serial killers, one of the highlighted red flags in the childhood of a serial killer is killing of animals. So that was something that really piqued my interest when I was looking into it. He also did attempt to take his own life at one point and failed, but refuses to really talk about it after it happened. So like I said, it was not a good upbringing. It was something where in his household, there weren't really a ton of rules. There weren't anything like that. He kind of ran the household. um, and they all just kind of did what they want. And his father, Steve, actually will become a big part of this case as well, as will his brother, Michael. But his father, Steve, I think kind of led him into the direction that he is. Hey, Ducky Dale. Welcome in. Have fun at your disco. All right. So now that I've introduced you guys to both Susan and Josh, I'm going to tell you guys kind of the story of when Susan met Josh. So they actually, for the first time, met in a class at the LDS Church Institute. I believe it was, hang on, I have it written down. Let's see. Actually, before we get into how they met, I do want to talk about a previous relationship that Josh had. Like I said, he had said, or he in previous relationships was also very controlling and such. So in the late 1990s, he was living in Tacoma, Washington as a student at the University of Washington. He had started dating a woman named Catherine Terry Everett, whom he had met at the LDS Church. They had moved in together. Hey, Meta Mom Christy, welcome in. They had moved in together. And as soon as they had moved in together, which obviously was not long after they had met and started dating, he started with very possessive behaviors. So he had started refusing to let her talk or visit friends and family without him present, tracking everywhere she was going, and kind of just along the lines of everything of a controlling, manipulative boyfriend in that aspect of, you're finally here. I'm going to be reading your text messages. I'm going to be listening when you call people. You're not allowed to send emails without me reading them. You have to tell me where you're going to and from, when you're leaving, so I know you're not stopping anywhere. And just kind of very, very controlling and so on, to the point where Catherine ends up saying that she is going on a trip with friends to Utah, leaves her the trip and just never came back. She didn't get any of her stuff. She ended up calling him, dumping him over the phone. And it was to that point where she was just like, I'm terrified and I can't go back. I can't get any of my stuff. I can't do any of that. So I do think that that's an important part of this whole situation. He did also try and get back with her a handful of times before he met Susan. And it ended up her meeting her now husband, who at the time they were just dating, but said it was her fiance. When she did go actually get a handful of things from him, she had to bring her boyfriend with her. And that was the only way that she felt safe, was if someone else was there with her. Hey, Summer. So yes, now right before he actually meets Susan and starts dating Susan, Puyallup, something like that. One of those, Avery. He actually was infatuated with one of Susan's older sisters, to the point where he would come over to their house, or she went to a school dance and she went with someone else. And he ended up going to the house and was like, he asked her parents if he could just wait there till she got home from the dance. Which is weird in itself. But obviously she ended up telling him like, hey, no, thank you. And, that was pretty much the end of that. And then we'll get into when Susan met Josh. So the first time they met was actually at the LDS Church Institute. They were taking a religion course there, and they were in the same class. So that is the first time that they kind of had encountered each other. And then it was actually in November of 2000 when Josh ended up having a dinner party where he invited a handful of people from school to his home for this dinner party, and that one of them was Susan. So after this dinner party is where they really got to know each other, stuff like that. I know that she had like offered to help do the dishes after the dinner, and she knew at that point that she loved him and all this stuff. So thank you. But yeah. And then that was, like I said, November of 2000. They had officially started dating after that dinner party. And then they ended up getting married in Portland, Oregon at the Portland, Oregon Temple in April of 2001. So once again, they met and got to know each other starting in November of 2000. And by April 2001, they were married. Now, I know just based on other things that I've heard that sometimes in the LDS church, marriage does happen that fast, and that's pretty normal. So I don't really have anything to say on regards like to the quickness of that, because it could be where they're from and their upbringing very normal. But yes, so I'm going to show you guys. This was actually, I want to say the first night they were together. That was that first night is the picture of them there. And then they married April 6th of 2001. And we are going to get into a little bit more of their early marriage life. So Josh had his bachelor's degree in business and worked for a handful of different companies. He didn't seem like he was able to hold a job for very long. From what they explained in some of the podcasts that I was listening to and so on, he always was the smartest person in the room, and I say that with air quotes. He always knew how to do things better in the company than his bosses and his boss's bosses, and was always right and never wrong, and didn't take like direction well. I know, surprise, surprise. But there was he worked for a handful of companies. So let's see. Then Susan was a licensed cosmetologist, but worked for Wells Fargo Investments. She worked, I want to say, for a handful of years in their early marriage as a hairstylist. But a lot of the time she would actually be doing haircuts and trims and stuff like that on people for free. People who either couldn't afford it, or I was being sarcastic. He thought he was smart. But he was the type of person where he's the smartest person in the room, regardless of the fact that everyone else in the room has been there for 20 plus years longer than he has. You know what I mean? So, sorry. Sometimes my sarcasm doesn't come through as easily when you can't see my face. So yes, after they got married, not only because Josh could not find a steady job, I should say, they ended up moving in with Josh's father, Steve Powell. So this is the first time Steve Powell comes into the storyline. Steve Powell is a disgusting human being, which you guys will end up learning a lot more about Steve Powell. Lucky you. And they ended up living with him for a while after their marriage, just so they could save up to be able to pay off a lot of things, different student loans, their house different things that they've just accrued over time. I know that they had also at some point, which we will get into once I get to our timeline, filed for bankruptcy eventually. And so there was a handful of reasons. Now, everything seemed to be somewhat normal with them living with Steve at the beginning. But then Susan started to realize that Steve was starting to get inappropriate with her. He actually grew infatuated with Susan, and we do hear things later on in regards to him making videos of himself doing things to himself while watching videos that he took of her. He would follow her around the house with a camcorder. He would use a small mirror to spy on her while she used the bathroom. She would steal her underwear from the laundry, read her journals, wrote her love songs. And then we actually do learn later on, because that was one thing that Josh and Steve had in common, was, hey, Anna, was the fact that they like to do like video diaries almost, where they would just talk about what they were feeling and what they were thinking and different things like that. And there are quite a few videos of Steve Powell talking about how he was in love with Susan, and based on how Susan looked at him or the way that she had said something, that he knew that she was in love with him too, and that she didn't know why she stayed with Josh, and Josh had told him multiple times that he would not be upset if Susan was in an accident, and all these different things. But then they were also still very, very close, Steve and Josh Powell, which does make it a little bit more interesting, I suppose. So I am going to share a little bit with you guys in regards to the songs that, let me grab it. Stephen Powell had written under a pseudonym in regards to Susan. Now, these are creepy songs. We're not going to listen to the whole thing. Just because, ew. But hang on, I'm going to make sure I'm sharing the right thing with you guys. Yep. Okay. Let me know. Hang on.
You made my eyes pop out of their sockets. You could empty all my pockets. This flirtation isn't rocket.
Okay. Could you guys hear that for the time? I'm going to keep playing it, but can you guys hear that? Dang. Aaron, do you want to send me a picture of that and I'll bring it up at the end of the live? Okay. So I'm taking you guys, can you guys hear the music when I play it? Because I'm going to play just a little bit more here. But I want to make sure you guys can hear it. Oh, okay. I think you can hear it. Delete what? Okay. Play a little bit more.
Silence. You came along and really knocked my socks off. Now you're all I think and talk of. So much for my former self-reliance. I said I love you, I couldn't cry, and you were mistaken if you thought I shelved it. I loved you.
Okay, I'm not gonna play too much more. Probably, actually, that was a good one. I'll have it linked down below if that's your cup of tea. Yeah, Sally Mae. And this was not the only one as well. There was a handful of songs that he had made under the pseudonym, the Steve Chantry, that were written about Susan. And he literally put these out while they were all together, like while Susan was still married to Josh. So, yeah, there's a lot to that, I suppose. It was actually in 2003, Steve confessed his feelings to Susan, which he accidentally recorded this. It was on his camcorder, but the camcorder was down, so you can only hear the audio of it. And she ends up completely rejecting him. But the entire encounter is on camera, or like video. It's on camera, but just the audio. No, this is Susan's father-in-law. So this is her husband Josh's father, is the one that wrote those songs and was taking the videos and doing things to himself while watching the videos that he took of her secretly changing and in the bathroom. And yeah, so this is her father-in-law that is writing all of this. Hi, my three sons. How are you? It's good to see you. Yeah. Which is 10 times worse. But then it was after this when he finally did, put out, yeah, right, Anna? After he confessed his feelings to her, that was when she was like, we need to leave. And it is at that point, yeah, yep, yes, K-Rays. It is at that point that they end up moving to Utah. Hey, Kelly. So, now I am going to, let me see. I have my timeline, but then I also want to introduce you guys to the boys before we get into the timeline. Just because obviously the boys are a big part of this, which is Susan and Josh's two boys. And thank you, Aaron. Okay. But I'm going to introduce you guys to Charlie and Braden first. So, as you guys can see on the screen here, it's a picture of the two Powell boys. On the left-hand side is the younger brother. That's Braden Timothy Powell. His date of birth is January 2nd, 2007. He was only, two when his mother went missing. So, there was not a ton of time. I know, they were so cute. But in his short 2 years of life, he loved to be tickled. He loved Transformers. He was a Transformer for Halloween, the year before he passed. And yeah, and then, like I said, there's not really a ton known other than he also liked blocks. He liked trucks. They were both very friendly, good kids. On the right-hand side is the older brother. This is Charles, or Charlie, as I will refer to him probably throughout the live. Charles Joshua Powell. His date of birth is January 19th, 2005. So he's 2 years older. I want to say he was 5. 3 years? No, 2 years. My mind. I want to say they were 2 and 5 or 2 and 4 when she ends up going missing. I have it written down. It's just obviously not on this page, because that's just how my life goes. Avery, yeah, which we will end up getting into that, which is kind of one of the biggest aspects of the story. Is not only is Susan missing, but once we get into the in-depth of the story, it unfortunately does end with Josh killing the two young boys and himself. So we will get into that once we get more into the deeper part of the details. But I do have a very specific timeline leading up to that event. But yeah, so Charlie was 5. He loved nature. He loved science. He loved insects. His daycare teacher had told a story about how almost every other day he would bring in like a worm from outside, and then not tell anyone and just hold on to it. And then when someone would finally like see it, he'd make them let him go bring it back outside to make sure it was safe. And he was just he was wanting to learn and loved being outside and science, like I said, nature, insects. He loved to write. He was just about to get glasses. And a lot of his friends and family had said that he was going to be a writer someday because he just loved it. I know. It's terrible. All right. Let me see. So now we are going to get into the more detailed timeline. Some of these will go faster. Some of these have a little bit more. On the specific overlays that you guys see, I just have the main topic, and then I have more in my notes on the side. So if you guys hear me talking more than what you're seeing, I'm not actually reading off of my screen. That's just a visual for you guys. So you can kind of keep track. So in 2007, Steve and Susan filed for bankruptcy. They had about $200,000 in debt that they had filed for. Not much more is known about that. But it's more of just along the lines of neither of them, until Susan ended up getting the job at the First Fidelity and then Wells Fargo. They didn't really have a solid income that was coming in all the time. And then we get on to Saturday, June 28th, 2008. This is when Susan ends up making letters to her family, saying, if anything ever happens to me, even if it looks like an accident, it wasn't an accident, and Josh did it. Not only that, but this is also when Susan decides to get herself a safety deposit box that only she has access to, and she made it very known that her husband shall not have access to the safety deposit box. But I don't think Josh actually knew about the safety deposit box, because it was not something that was brought up until police ended up finding it later on. Now this next part of this, let me just make sure. Oh, also in those letters to the family, it said that Josh told her that he would destroy her if she filed for divorce, which throughout this timeline, we will hear that Susan was contemplating filing for divorce, and that she had given Josh the deadline of their anniversary, April 6th of this year here, 2008, to be able to get his shit together, or she was going to probably file for divorce. Now, I don't know if that was something that she was just saying. Was she actually going to do it? I mean, we will never know. But it was something that she had definitely contemplated, brought up, so on. So Tuesday, July 29th, 2008, Susan records her assets. So there is a home video of Susan. I am going to share it with you guys, where she literally is talking to the camera and going over all of the assets in her home in case she did have to file for divorce, or in case she had to leave quickly, or something along those lines. Yeah. Sorry, reading chat too. Yes, LFT told me about the Diesel brothers. But I'm going to share this video with you guys. I don't know if we're going to watch the whole thing, if I will skip through it, or how we want to do this, because it's a 12-minute video, and it's by the Salt Lake Tribune. So, but you guys will hear and see Susan talking.
This is me, July 29th, 2008. It is 12:33 Mountain Time. covering all my bases, making sure that if something happens to me or my family or all of us, that our assets are documented. Hope everything works out and we're all happy and live happily ever after as much as that's possible. Charlie, say hi. Today is Tuesday, July 29th, 2008, and we are in the 6254 West Sarah Circle house. This is me. Hi. Sorry. And it is, can you see that? 11:44 a.m. And I am documenting all our assets just in case of any emergencies, fire, flood, damage, disputes. And we have 2 Samsung monitors. This is Josh's computer, and there's some type of backup device and speakers. And here's the kind of pimping out stuff he's done.
Okay, one thing I want to touch on before we continue watching it is, number one, this is heartbreaking because she had to do this, number one. But not only that, but you also see Charlie. But you guys will also notice the amount of computer stuff that is around there. One thing about Josh is that he was very, what's the word? Picky with where money went. Even Susan's money. So money that Susan was bringing in from her job, it would go into an account that he had control of. And then he would say, okay, here's this money for you to go buy food for the family. Or no, we're not going to do that. That's too expensive. No, we're not going to get the name brand mac and cheese. We're only getting the store brand because it's $2 less. But then also he'd be like, hey, here's $30. You guys, you have to figure out how you can make dinner for $30 for the entire week. There were many a times where she would ask neighbors or friends or people in their church, for food, just saying like, hey, can my boys need food? Can you please get me something, or can I get something and I can get you back later? Something along those lines. Yes. And like Mo had just said, she rode a bicycle to work in the winter too. He took away her driving rights and made her bike in the winter to work, which I think was over an hour, just biking in general. So then add in ice and snow and shit like that in Utah, and it would be treacherous. But then the worst part about it was they weren't hard on money. It was just Josh didn't let her use it. So, hi Ruby, it's good to see you too. He would buy, like I said, like she's showing here, multiple computers, multiple computer accessories, and different hard drives and backup drives, and just a ton of stuff that he would utilize. He loved like the really souped up RC cars, our remote control cars, where he would just get like the super, super expensive ones and then drive them around, or like whatever was popular back in the mid 2000s, I suppose, of like not drones, but drone like things. He would spend his money on that, or he would, get all of his favorite food and get himself a steak to grill on the grill. But then the kids and Susan would just have to be having mac and cheese for the 6th night in a row. So it was kind of that type of thing where it's just very controlling, which is not unlike his other relationship that we talked about. But not only was it Susan that was having to deal with this now, but Susan as a mother having to deal with this in regards to her boys as well. So we'll watch a little bit more of this.
done to his computer. He built it himself. I think there's like 5 hard drives, something about doing raids. There's those for all the computer geeks. And Josh locked this, but this is all of his files. See, locked. Those are his files. And he bought expensive stuff like these are, I think this was like a couple of $1,000 of like, it says graphic design templates by Stock Layouts or something like that. All right, here's our unfinished basement. We bought 3,000 pounds of wheat, and these are buckets of wheat. See? And this one, whoops. Chemical-free hard white wheat with mint green gum. Whole lot more tools. So we bought drill sets. There's a nail gun by Boss Stitch. There's a rigid small drill or Milwaukee drill. A rigid, I think that's a sander of some sort. There's another rigid saw. Paint supplies. This is all of Josh's RC car stuff. You are with me. I'm told it's like worth $3,000. Justified by a babysitter to be able to run our TV. Let go of my leg. Okay. So Josh built his entertainment center. Speakers, 5.1 surround sound. Be quiet.
Okay, I'm just, for fair use and everything like that, I'm just making sure that I can comment. As you guys can see, it's literally just 12 minutes of her going through their entire house and documenting everything that they have. And what was the wheat for? I believe they were prepping. Yeah, like Mo said, Avery, I'm pretty sure that they were prepping for food. I'm not exactly sure of the history of that, but that is what I believe it is for, yes. Prepping, being stocked up for whatever may happen. Who knows? Yes, Mark. Yep. She was doing this technically for both. The thought was she didn't know if Josh would have hurt her, would have tried to burn down the entire house or something. Or if there was a situation where she needed to get out fast. Then she would have all of their assets. She said it was someone else that was interviewed on one of the podcasts that had stated something along the lines of like, she did it, because she wouldn't be surprised if he would get rid of things after the fact. Hey, Idaho Charlie, welcome in. Like if she were to leave him or so on, that he would be like, no, I didn't have, $5,000 worth of tools or computers, because then she'd get half and so on. So she wanted to make sure that she had that, but also she didn't know the type of thing that would, not all, I don't think, Anna, but I do know it is something that is common for them. Yes. Hey, Betty Joe, welcome in. Yeah, that's true, K-Rays. Food storage for emergency. Is that just a Utah thing, a Mormon thing, or what? Do we know that? Very common. All right, I'm going to play a little bit more of this, and then we'll get back to the timeline. Both. Yeah, for LDS. Okay.
Toy. keys and locks. Cooking, cleaning supplies. There's another remote by the Clorox on the right. This is recycling and garbage. There's our washer. Duet, HT, Whirlpool. Front loader, and there's the dryer. We got it at the Scratch and Dent at RC Willie's when we first moved here in 2004, like March, April. This is a can organizer that Josh and I made. I had to help him all through the way. He doesn't do projects by himself. More supplies. Little freezer. Josh did have this before me. Table saw.
Okay, one thing I want to bring up too that really that I found very interesting is, I don't remember if it was with Charlie or Braden, but when Susan went into labor, Josh didn't get up and like go and help her when she was in the hospital in labor. He had to be forced to go to the hospital with her, and then when he was there, he ended up bringing his computer and a bunch of computer stuff and just sat on the couch in the hospital room while she was laboring on his computer. And it wasn't until she was about to push that her dad, actually Chuck Cox, ends up going up to him and was like, took the computer out of his hands and was like, go over there. And it was only at that point that he went over there for the birth of his child. So yeah. Hey, Real Gone Gonzo. Welcome in. Back in Fish Spring area this spring looking for our Susan. Many searches, we will never give up. Absolutely. Thank you for stopping in. I appreciate it. All right. Let's continue watching a little bit more of this, and then I will get back into our timeline.
Says rigid. We built a table on it. This is Josh's welding machine. He borrowed the cart from the Wades. There's the box to the filter. Sorry, this is boring. Sorry. Cage. More tools. More tools. Our Scratch and Dent furniture that we got from RC Willie's when we moved in the house in 2004, like March, April. This is a $3,000 rocker glider. My parents lent us the money for. We still owe them, I think, $3,000. No, wait, that chair was $300. We owe them $3,300, and we owed them $4,200 or something like that. Now we are left standing owing $3,000 for this bathroom. Josh felt the need to pull the mirror out and cut more holes in the wall. A little stand. And obviously what I'm shooting this off says JVC hard disk camcorder micro S HD 30 GB 7 to 37 hours for record.
Okay, so that is the gist of her video. I think it's very important because not only do you kind of see where her mindset is, but you also hear her voice and you see everything in real time of everything that Josh has bought and everything like that. And like I said, I will also, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you. I will also link this video down below so that you guys have the ability, if you do want to go back and look at this in depth more, then you guys will have the ability to do that. So let's see, were we at this one? Yes. Okay. So now we're going to go back to the timeline a little bit. Yes and no. I think it was more of he just liked to spend the money the way that he wanted to, and that was it. You know what I mean? I don't know necessarily if he was a hoarder. I think it was more of a he got what he wanted and made sure that no one else got what they wanted. Hey, Lisa. So, yeah. Now we are going to get into the days leading up to her disappearance and the days following her disappearance. Yes. Yep, my 3 sons, they were Mormon. They both were technically, but as Josh had grown up, he had, thanks to his father, very much been against the Mormon church. But Susan and her family were still very much in their faith and proud of their faith. So she was trying to raise the boys in her faith. He was purposely kind of putting things in their head. The best way I can explain it is like parent alienation, but on things that he didn't like. So instead of it being parent versus parent in parent alienation, it was like parent versus the LDS church almost, if that makes sense. Probably doesn't, but I'm trying. Yeah. Have a safe flight, Thistle. Yes, and it was a rocky marriage from the beginning. Well, not only that, but then living with Steve and how Steve was with Susan and the inappropriateness of that, and so on. So now we are going to start Sunday, December 6th of 2009. This is the only day into the 7th where I have it time-stamped. But then after this, it'll just be day by day. Josh and Susan lived with Steve. So if you remember when I was talking a little bit earlier about Steve, you know, taking videos of her and stealing her underwear from the laundry and putting a mirror under the bathroom door so that he could watch her go to the bathroom and all this other stuff, that was all happening while Susan and Josh lived with Steve. That was also when he was writing the songs that I had you guys listen to a snippet of. And so on. And then it was right after Steve confessed his love to Susan and she rejected him that Susan was like, no, Josh, we need to move away. So they ended up moving from Washington to Utah. Hey, OG Fish, welcome in. It's good to see you. All right. So we are going to start at noon on Sunday, December 6th, 2009. Susan ends up taking Charlie and Braden to services at her local LDS ward. And that was kind of how their day had begun. We then get to 2:29 p.m. where Susan calls a friend. It is the last call made or received by Susan. And at the same time as that, Josh ends up taking the boys sledding as well. And a neighbor also visits Susan at 5 p.m. that day while the boys are sledding with Josh. And then she ends up leaving, and that neighbor is the last person to see Susan other than obviously Josh and the boys, according to them, before she goes missing. So at 8:30 p.m., the neighbor ends up seeing Josh return home with the boys and pull into the garage and closed the door. And then let me turn the page on my notebook. Around 11:45 p.m., the neighbor actually hears a car alarm going off in the Powell garage. Now the garage is closed and all the lights in the house are off, but the car alarm is going off in their garage. So that was just a weird aspect of this that the neighbor mentions. Okay. Is the night of December 6th, right before midnight on December 7th. The neighbor hears a car alarm go off, but it's the car in the garage and there's no other lights and stuff like that on. So, okay. Okay, next. Monday, December 7th, 2009. From midnight to 12:30 a.m., Josh left home to go camping with the boys. Now, this is one of the biggest question marks on this case, for me at least, is the aspect that at midnight on the 7th, so what, a half hour to an hour after the car alarm goes off, Josh leaves the house with the boys to go camping. He says it's not unusual for them. They just go sleep in the car, have s'mores, and blah, blah, blah. Now, the one interesting thing about this is there was snow and it was below freezing temperatures in this area. So he was taking a 2 and a 5-year-old, 2 and 4, whatever age the boys were at that point. I have it written down, like I said. Hang on, I'm going to see if I have it on this page. Nope. But, yeah. Hey, Kate. It's good to see you. I miss you. How are you? Right, Aaron? But either way, Josh claims that he leaves with the boys to go camping at the Simpson Springs campground in Utah's West Desert. Now, this is bringing 2 boys under the age of 6 and under to a campground in below freezing temperatures at midnight. So that adds a big question mark to begin with. He also claimed that Susan did not go with them. And so she stayed home and slept in her own bed, which is okay. The campground that they claim to have gone to is about 2 hours drive from West Valley City, which is where they currently had lived. And like I said, temps were below freezing. So then we go to the 9 a.m. to the 10 a.m. hour on December 7th. Yeah. And Anna, we'll get into that of what the boys end up saying happened once we get to the police interviews. Because I want to say, I don't know if it was Charlie or Braden. One of them ends up saying, Mommy went camping with us. And then one of them says she was in the trunk. Another one says, no, you're good. No problem. Another one says that Mommy stayed with the crystals, which we also learn later on that the stayed with the crystals. The crystals were somewhere that is a local rock finding area. I don't know how to explain that, but it has a bunch of geodes everywhere, which are the ones that you can break in half and they're crystally on the inside. And Josh was known to bring the boys and Susan there to like break open the geodes and stuff like that. So that was one of the big red flags for everyone else. And him saying, Mommy stayed because she loves the beautiful crystals. I don't know if he said laying or if he just said she was staying. There's been a lot of different things in regards to what specifically was said. And it also depends on what boy, because unfortunately, the 5-year-old is going to be more reliable than the 2-year-old, but neither of them are going to be lying because they don't understand that concept yet. You know? So now we get to the 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. hour on December 7th. And this is when the boys' daycare provider calls both Josh's mom and his sister Jennifer, concerned she couldn't reach the boy. The boys were not dropped off, and that she had tried to call both Josh and Susan and couldn't. So, yeah, it is at that point that Josh's mom and sister end up calling police. They go to the house. No one's there. Josh is not answering his phone. Susan's not answering her phone. They are actually worried about the potential of a carbon monoxide poisoning because in their specific area recently, there had been 2 incidents of carbon monoxide poisoning of people being knocked out due to it. I don't know if those people lost their lives or what, but it had been something that was happening in that area, especially with the cold and heaters and everything like that. So that was kind of Josh's sister Jennifer and his mom's number one fear is no one's answering their phone, no one showed up anywhere. Was there some type of carbon monoxide leak in their home? And that's what's happening. So they go there, they call police, and the police go. They're able to break in. They give them permission to break in, and yeah, right, Anna. They gave him permission to break in, and police go in. There's no one home, but they do notice a handful of things. So there are 2 box fans that are on in the living room, that are focused on a wet spot on the carpet. And that was kind of the main thing that they notice when they go in is no one's home. It doesn't seem to be a carbon monoxide thing, but there are 2 large box fans that are focused on one specific wet spot on the carpet. We do find out later on that there was blood found in that area and that the blood does end up being Susan's blood. But at this point in time, we don't know that yet. At this point, we also find out that Susan does not show up for work, and then she is officially reported missing. Now, this part gets interesting because Josh actually answers his phone. At some point during this time frame, he answers his phone and allows them to say, "Hey, where are you? Like, is Susan with you? Where are you? Where are you guys? We're trying to figure where you guys are." And Josh's like, me and the boys went camping. Susan's at home or she's on her way to work or whatever, which is why Susan is the only one that is reported missing. Now, I know a lot of his family, he was very nonchalant about a lot of it. His family was like, "Josh, you need to come home. We need to figure this out. Like, Susan is missing." And he would get very, like, not defensive, because he didn't really seem defensive, but he was mostly like, "Hey, boys, what do you guys want to eat? Do you guys want pizza? Do you want burgers? What do you guys want?" And he'd be like, "We'll stop and get some food first, and then maybe we'll come home. We're on our way," all this different stuff. But eventually, like, someone ends up being like, "No, you need to come home. Your wife is missing." And so he does end up going home. All right. So at 5 p.m., Josh returns home with the boys and is greeted by police. It is said that let's see. Oh, he wasn't answering his phone because he had not brought a charger, so he was preserving its battery. But as he's saying this, the police look into his vehicle and see that his phone is plugged into a charger in the vehicle, sitting in the center console. So that was a lie that he just kind of threw out there, even though his phone was literally being charged in front of both of them. But then we also find out that he actually had Susan's cell phone in his van as well, and her SIM card had been removed. That was one aspect of this that Josh could not explain. And it was not something, it was like in the bottom of like his center console. So he like had thrown it in there. It wasn't something that just slipped down somewhere. He had put it in there deliberately. Police also found a generator, blankets, a gas canister, tarps, and a shovel in the vehicle, which in the van makes sense if they really did go camping. Now that is obviously questioned, but I don't know. So it is at that point that Josh is taken to West Valley City Police Department to be questioned. Now, this is something where he is told this entire time, like, you're not under arrest, but your wife is missing, so we're going to question you. And everything along those lines, which if you guys are a part of, if you guys listened to my last Maddie Kingsbury case as updates of the filings that Adam's lawyer has put out, one of the things is that he wants one of his interviews thrown out because he claims they didn't read him his Miranda rights when he came in for a voluntary interview, which I think is one of the things that is very similar to what's happening here, is that he's just being questioned, and the boys are also being questioned, you know, at this point of where's Susan. He actually ends up leaving the interview, and the way that he ends up leaving is he says something along the lines of, let me think about it and I'll get back to you in a few days. And the investigator ends up looking at him. He's like, your wife is missing. This is not something that you can sit a few days on. And the whole thing was just like, what? Now, during this time, Josh is not aware that they are also questioning the boys. So at this point, it's police interview Charlie Powell, who at the time was 4, and says that they went camping, says Susan went with them but did not return. And then we also find out that a few weeks after this first initial interview, Charlie says mom is dead to their daycare provider. And then Braden also drew a picture of a van with 3 people inside and told daycare that mommy was in the trunk. So there were different things that the boys had said that raised obvious red flags at that point. Because like I said, they're at ages of 2 and 4 that make it so that lying is not like believable. You know what I mean? All right. Let's go to our next day. Tuesday, December 8th, 2009. At 11 a.m. is when Josh ends up calling Chuck Cox to tell him that Susan is missing. So Chuck Cox is Susan's father. And that is at 11 a.m. So he waited till the following day at 11 a.m. to notify her family. It is then at 12:44 p.m. that Josh goes in for another interview at the West Valley City Police Department, this time with Detective Ellis Maxwell. And this interview is the one where the footage can be found. I'm not going to be showing it here today because it's like 2.5 hours. But it is online and I will have it linked down below. If any of you guys are interested in watching his interview with police. But one of the important aspects of this interview is that Detective Maxwell seemed very concerned about cuts on Josh's hand at this time. So this is on the next day. All right. And they also seize the van. So I don't think that they were able to serve the search warrant, but they were able to seize it at least. But then Josh ends up going to, I want to say, the Salt Lake City International Airport, renting a car, and then within 2 days had driven 800 miles on this rental car and then returned it 2 days later. No one knows where he was for these 800 miles in these 2 days. But that obviously just that it had happened. Another thing that happened within those 2 days and the 800 miles was that he purchased a cell phone and activated it in Tremonton, Utah, near the Utah-Idaho border. Which is also interesting. Just why buying a new cell phone. So Wednesday, December 9th, 2009, the police execute a search warrant. They took boxes, bags, and computers from the Powell household. Police end up finding Susan's blood and life insurance policies for $1.5 million, and the letter from Susan fearing for her life. They also found blood from an unknown male contributor that I don't believe has ever been identified as to who that other male contributor was. But it was said that around the area where the box fans were, there was blood that tested positive to be Susan's. So, all right, let's go to the next one. All right, so now we have Thursday, December 10th, 2009. Now remember, guys, this all started around midnight from December 6th to December 7th. So we're only about 3 to 4 days after her original disappearance. Thursday, December 10th, 2009, the police searched the Simpson Spring campgrounds for signs at the campsite that Josh claimed to go to, but they literally found no evidence of him being there. So not only did they not find evidence of Susan there, but they didn't actually find evidence that Josh was ever there. So that was obviously a red flag. We have Friday, December 11th, 2009, which is when they had stopped the search at the Simpson Spring campground, stating obviously nothing is found. Once again, the place Josh claims he is, they can't even prove that he was there. Now there was a sheep herder in the area that had claimed that he saw the van and a man outside of the van, and that Josh actually had said in one of his interviews, like, I had to stop for a man that was herding sheep. So they were able to somewhat confirm that he was in the area, but obviously that's one person, and it's not like that person specifically knew who Josh was. So yeah. And then let's see. We have Saturday, December 12th, 2009. During the daytime on this day, the family and friends, as well as Josh, gathered outside the LDS Hunter Central Stake Center. They sang hymns, prayed, and then began a 24-hour fast. And Josh was seen tearing up, but not speaking anywhere. So, yeah, interesting. And then it is actually the 2 days later, on Monday, December 14th, 2009, when Josh Powell hires defense attorney Scott C. Williams at the campground summer. Yes. They stopped after, technically it was like they spent 2 full days at this one campground trying to figure out if they could find evidence of Susan being there or Josh being there or both, or, so on. But not the all over search. That was more than a day. All right. Next, we go to Tuesday, December 15th, 2009. Josh is scheduled to do his 3rd interview with the West Valley City Police Department, and he doesn't show up. Police then do a public announcement that Josh is impeding their efforts, and that's kind of the first time that everyone starts publicly side-eyeing Josh, of like, he not only is not helping, but now he's impeding the efforts of police in finding Susan. So, next we have... Right. Well, Mo, and then it gets to the whole blame game as well once we find out what ends up happening to the boys and stuff, because when we look back at everything that we know, and we're only obviously getting... One thing is that we only are getting a fraction of what the police actually have. I know the police in this case have come out and stated, like, we were very afraid of double jeopardy, potentially bringing him in and then him getting off, and then later someone finding Susan's body and them not being able to charge him again. And that was kind of one of the main reasons why they were holding off, is they had a few more boxes that they wanted to check before they officially brought him in. But I think that there could have been different things that he could have been potentially charged with that just kept him behind bars and kept people safe, to potentially change how this outcome would have happened. But once again, we are also looking at it from knowing what happened. So I don't know. I think it can be difficult. Yeah, they were close. You're right. On Thursday, December 17th, 2009, the police actually subpoenaed 2 news as well as a few other news stations for their footage. So during this time frame of the 10 or so days between when she goes missing and this subpoena is issued, both Josh and his father, Stephen, as well as the other of family members on both his side and her side, were interviewed for news stations, gave interviews on the street if they were on the side of the street. I know Chuck Cox was on the side of the street doing one of those honk, if you remember, Susan things, and that actually ended up with Steve and Josh pulling over and kind of calling him out and being like, why are you doing this here? And so on and so forth. So there was just a lot of public footage that was able to be subpoenaed for the police to kind of answer a few questions of how they're reacting or things that they're saying, to be able to contradict and different things like that. Then we have Friday, December 18th, 2009. Josh packs up the boys and drives up to Washington and stays. Now he is going to be living at his father's house. To me, it seems like there was a lot of clues in plain sight. Yeah. But that's the other thing, though, K-Braze, is we're seeing this laid out nicely as this should have happened, but I don't know if it was as nicely laid out in plain sight at the time where it could have been utilized to make decisions. You know what I mean? So that's why I try to stay very... I think that there probably was something that could have been done, but also I wasn't there, so I don't want to go too hard one way or the other. But yes, so where were we? They end up going to Washington, and they're going to be staying with Josh's brother, or Josh's father, Steve. Now, I'm pretty sure a lot of Josh's other siblings were also living with Steve at the time. The only person that had really gotten away at this point was Jennifer, as well as, I don't know if his brother Michael had gotten away at that point, but he was going to school at the University of Washington, I believe. So I'm not sure exactly. Red Rock 59, that's a great point. Red Rock said no body cases were more rare back then. You're right. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. Sunday, December 20th, 2009. Family and friends hold vigils for Susan in both Utah and in Washington. Just as trying to hold hope for all of this. This was almost 2 full weeks from when she went missing. Oh, that's right. He was in the military first, and then he came back and did his schooling at the University of Washington, and then he actually ended up going for his PhD here in Minneapolis at the U of M. Thank you, Red Rock. That's me getting ahead of my notes. All right, so where were we? The vigils are held. All right. Next, we have Sunday, January 4th, 2010. The social media campaigns are launched. So this is... He went to a handful of colleges, Anna. I want to say he went to 2 different colleges for his undergrad, and then he ended up coming to Minneapolis, like I said, for his PhD. So the social media campaigns are launched. So this is the Facebook groups, some of which are still up and are a great place for information and updates regarding Susan's case. But yeah, January 4th, 2010 is when those were launched. We then have Tuesday, January 6th. Josh Powell and Michael Powell, so Josh and his brother, end up driving back down to West Valley City. To pack up the Powell home. It is revealed that Josh had been fired. He claims that it was due to the publicity of the case. I don't know if it's ever been officially stated why. And unfortunately, I don't think that we could believe him regardless of why he says he was fired. But that due to him being fired, he won't be able to keep the home. So they're packing it up and moving everything back to Washington, and they're just going to live with his dad. We then get to Thursday, January 28th, 2010. And after they packed up the home, they went back to Washington, lived with his dad, and then he comes back the end of the month to make some repairs because he is going to start renting out the home. So it's kind of showing you guys, instead of just selling the house off because he can't afford it anymore, he's going to rent it out. Next, we have Friday, January 29th, 2010. The West Valley City Police Department served a search warrant on the minivan. The one that was driven the night that Susan disappeared. Now, this was part that I was a little bit confused about because there were two different... I don't believe he was ever stated as a suspect, Avery. I want to say he was only a person of interest. The reason I say that is because once we get further down the line, I'm going to bring up the Charlie and Braden Act, which is currently going through the courts to try and get enacted. But that's in regards to visitation and custody of children with a parent, if one parent is a suspect in a murder case. So I know a lot of people have been a little bit upset about the wording in that because it was stated that he was never actually named a suspect in her disappearance. He was a person of interest. So if the police don't specifically say he's a suspect, would that law or that act pertain to him, if that makes sense? So because of that, I would agree with you that I don't think they should have. But I also think that it wasn't necessarily as far as we'd think. And he was still making himself somewhat available. So, but yeah, one part about this is that they serve up the search warrant for the blue minivan that he was driving the night that Susan disappeared. I found this interesting because it was after the second interview they had stated that they seized the minivan. So I'm not sure if either one of those was incorrect or if they had just seized it back then but didn't get the warrant until now. But I don't know how that would work either. It brings me back to the case we just covered. Shoot. It's going to bug me now. Give me a sec. I'm going to look. Hang on. Looking something up. The Cassidy Ritchie case. It was the last video I did 2 weeks ago where her car was found on the side of the road. They towed it and it was sitting in the impound at the police station for 2 days. And then once they finally got the search warrant, they searched it and she was in the car, deceased. So I'm wondering if it was a situation like that. And if any of you guys that are familiar with the case are aware of why it was stated twice in multiple publications, the 2 different times, or if it's 2 different vehicles too, because I was not able to kind of specify that. So if anyone else could help me with that. So then we get to Monday, February 15th, 2010. Yeah, that's true, Anna. Where the Cox family ends up holding a press conference. Say again. Sally Mae, the part of this where they state that after his second police interview, Josh's, that they seize the van and then he ends up going to get the rental car at the airport. But then it stated again that on Friday, January 29th, 2010, that they serve a search warrant on the minivan. So I'm just curious if they just held it that long and didn't actually search it until January 29th, 2010, or if they were two different cars. The one that they seized, the van that they seized then, was that different than the original or this one? I'm just curious if anyone knows. But the Cox family holds a press conference on Monday, February 15th. And the Cox family states that Susan told them that she might end her relationship with Josh Powell by their April 6th anniversary if he didn't get his shit together, which I kind of said that at the very beginning. They also publicly state that Josh Powell was physically abusive at least once with her, and that he had very, very controlling behaviors, which they then actually reveal as to what the specific behaviors are. The family also ends up announcing the Susan Cox Powell Foundation. So we're going to take a little bit of a same van. They confiscated it, took it a while to get it searched. Okay. Thank you, Anna. I'm going to take this overlay off, and then I'm going to show you guys the Susan Cox Powell Foundation website, which, like I said at the very beginning, if you guys weren't here after the live tonight, I'm going to be making a donation to the Susan Cox Powell Foundation. And then I will be posting on the community post to show you guys everything. But it's going to come from all of us. So let me bring this up. This is a great resource. And it also has not only information about Susan, her case, but it also has a lot of information and resources for domestic violence victims and survivors and everything like that. So this here, let me make sure I'm sharing it with you guys. Okay, I am. Is the homepage here. There's a song. It also has the different updates which are written here. So on and so forth. Here's the donate button. There's blogs, there's the Facebook group, just different things. And then if you guys come up here, it kind of gives you guys information about the foundation. And it says here, it kind of goes over what happened. But it says the Susan Cox Powell Foundation was established in 2010 by Susan's parents with the help of friends and after an overwhelming response from people around the world. Their emails, letters, and Facebook messages of support and sharing of other parents with missing children, questions of parents concerned about their children in potentially similar situations, but without the support we felt moved us to create this foundation. The mission of this foundation is to assist families of missing persons by providing no-cost strategic media consulting services to ensure that their loved one's face and name remain in the public eye as long as possible, to research and catalog resources across the United States that may be helpful to families of missing persons in an effort to create a resource clearinghouse for other families to use in their times of crisis, and to support domestic violence prevention efforts and to participate in community and school-based education about domestic violence prevention with a special emphasis on recognizing the early signs of abuse. So, as you guys can tell, it's their way of assisting families that are unfortunately going through a similar situation, which you guys know as well as I do that domestic violence in the United States is at an all-time high. It has been since the lockdowns. And and that unfortunately one of the most dangerous times in this is when they try to leave. So I think the Susan Cox Powell Foundation is incredible for wanting to help be a resource, not only for families of missing persons, but just in general, having a place where you can go to and have all of the resources needed for like anyone that could potentially need help are all here. But not only that, but they also have a community here that can allow you to not feel alone in a situation like this. So once again, it just kind of goes through the rest of it. And I am also, like I said, once again, I will put this down below in the description. Like I said, it has about Susan. It has about the different people that are involved in this case, her friends, her family, those who post on here. Has domestic violence information, resources, understanding it. They have media coverage, photo galleries, the different aspects of this, book lists, personal stories, the Tears Foundation, Charlie and Braden Project, Charlie's Dinosaur Project, and just different ways that you can help. And then they do have the contact us. So once again, like I said, I'll share this down below so you guys can kind of explore this yourself. But there's a lot of really good information in that. So, all right. So let's go back to the timeline. We're over halfway done. So just letting you guys know. I said this would be a longer live, so I apologize ahead of time, but all right. Back to the timeline. We have Thursday, February 25th, 2010. This is the day that family members and friends end up putting missing person posters as well as purple ribbons up around the Powell neighborhood. Now, this is not the Powell neighborhood of Susan and Josh's. It is Steve Powell's neighborhood where Josh is currently living. And I believe it was said that they had potentially put these up to like fluster Josh and his family to see if something would, let loose in this. Absolutely, Avery. Thank you. I appreciate you guys being here and wanting to hear all this because Susan's case is something that's really important. Domestic violence awareness is very important, especially getting out the resources. But this is also a case where I think a lot of things can be learned from it as well. And changes being made, but also, like they said, is just trying to be that person that can assist. So, now I will say Thursday, February 25th, with the missing person posters and the purple ribbons, it was in the areas where Josh would take the boys outside, and Charlie and Braden would often be like, why is mommy's face on this tree, or so on. And so Josh ends up, I don't know if he told someone to take them down or if he did it himself. But he said, this is really upsetting the boys. So can we not have them up around here versus just, doing it. Then we have Saturday, April 10th. There is a volunteer search at the campground. Once again, no results are found. And then Wednesday, August 25th, 2010, the West Valley City Police Department released data regarding Susan's case. So this is more along the lines of the numerical data of the case. So, for example, there were 6,850 man hours to date in the search. So up to August 25th, 2010. So less than a year. There was $150,000 cost to the department so far. And there are 5 full-time detectives assigned to Susan's case. And that is 5 out of the 28 full-time detectives in this department. So those were just the main numerical data that was given out during this press release. Next, we have Friday, September 10th, 2010. Chuck Cox and Ed Smart, which if you guys are aware, is the father of, was it Elizabeth Smart? Is that right? It's off the top of my head. Hang on. I want to make sure. I saw her book today when I went to Barnes & Noble. Yep, Elizabeth Smart, who was kidnapped and then found. But they actually did make an appearance to promote in legislation requiring those arrested on suspicion of a felony to be required to submit to a DNA test. So it was Chuck Cox and Ed Smart who went in front of the legislators to try and fight for this to become law. Which, two men who have lost their daughters, yes, Ed Smart obviously got his back, but not after, torture. Hey! Hey, Wolfie! Welcome in, welcome in. All right, so then we get to Monday, December 6th, 2010. Now, if you guys remember, technically, I want to say it's the 7th is when people think that she actually went missing. But the 6th is the anniversary, considering. Which is the 1-year anniversary of Susan's disappearance. And this is when... I know, welcome in, welcome in. It is around the time of the 1-year anniversary of Susan's disappearance that Josh Powell and Steve Powell start to claim different accusations. So there is a website that is made in regards to Susan and her childhood journals, saying that the Cox family abused her as a child and all this stuff, which none of that has been proven anywhere. They also claimed that Susan had run away with Stephen Kosher, a Utah man who had went missing in Nevada in December of 2009, claimed that they ran away to Brazil, where Stephen served his LDS mission to start a new life, even though there was zero evidence of this. And also we're telling the police, like, well, you should probably be checking in the cosmetology stores down in Brazil because that's probably where you'll find her, and like just saying all this stuff. But the thing is they were publicly stating this. So obviously just bullshit trying to throw shit out there. But it was around that same time, the 1-year anniversary, that they started kind of spouting off all of these different potentials in their eyes. And I say that with my fingers doing air quotes. All right. Let's go to the next one. We then have a little bit of time before our next date on our timeline, which is Friday, July 15th, 2011. Oh, yeah, but that's about as far as it goes. Is shit, Wolfie. Hi, Nor's grandma. Hey, guys, I have a secret. Tomorrow's Nor's grandma's birthday. So tell her happy birthday for tomorrow, guys. For Nora's grandma. All right, but back to the timeline. You can in chat, Wolfie. I just don't say it. Yeah, you're right, Sally Mae. It does. It also contained a jury pool. Yep. All right. So Friday, July 15th, 2011, Josh and Steve make an announcement that they intend to release Susan's childhood journals. Now, these are journals of her growing up as a teenage girl. I mean, if I went back and read my journals, I go back, and unfortunately, when I was a teenage girl, Facebook was a thing. And I still am notified all the time of freaking what I said on Facebook 15 years ago or whatever it is. And I probably should delete a lot of it, but I haven't. And so sorry. Let me see. Where were we? I will say that they didn't ever actually get released. That a judge ends up putting it's not like a restraining order, but he says, no, you're not to release these. And not only are you not allowed to release them, but you're also not allowed to talk about their contents. So that was a win on the judge's part in regards to this case. Let's see. Then we have Tuesday, August 9th, 2011. The judge grants restraining order against Chuck Cox. So there were a handful of instances where Chuck Cox and Judy Cox would purposely go to I love and miss you too, Nora's grandma. Purposely would go to places that they know that Josh would bring the boys, because Josh was keeping Charlie and Braden from the Cox side of the family. So there was a handful of instances. One thing that Josh liked to do with his boys was bring them to, what is it, Home Depot? And do like the build with me's. So a lot of like the stores like Home Depot or Lowe's will have like a Saturday morning where you can bring your kids in and there's like a project that you all do together at the store. And that was something that Josh liked to do with the boys, and he would bring them there. So there was a handful of times when Chuck and Judy Cox would show up there. And there were a handful of times where they'd be like, can we hug the boys? And Josh would be like, no, don't talk to them. And obviously this would break their heart because it's their grandkids. And not only that, but their daughter and the boy's mother is still missing. So it's like, it was heartbreaking. Well, it ends in one of these times, it ends in getting kind of heated, and Josh ends up filing a restraining order against Chuck Cox. Now, this restraining order, although it was granted, it is only in regards to Josh. It is not in regards to the boys. So he could potentially still go into the areas of where Josh was. He just could not get within 50 feet of him. So they could still be in like the same area and the same place. He just could not physically go near Josh or talk to Josh. So there were a handful of times where they would still go in hopes that they could potentially like get the boys' attention to like wave so that the boys would come over and, you know, hug them and stuff like that. And then they'd run back to their dad. But then he would not be breaking his restraining order because he wouldn't be within 50 feet of Josh. Hey, Red Eye. Did they ever make it? I don't know. There's a lot of like true crime documentaries, Datelines, different things like that have done her story. I know Investigation Discovery has a specific one on Hulu of the Susan Powell case. So yeah. So then we go to Thursday. Where are we? Thursday, August 18th, 2011. The West Valley City Police Department announced that there is a break in the case. Now, this is not the break that we're hoping for, obviously. But they just announced that there's going to be a search that will happen in the abandoned mine shafts near Ely, Nevada, and that the media is invited. So this was one aspect of this case that kind of rubbed the media the wrong way, because they were told this was a huge break in the case, but like, I don't know. Have a good night, Mo. You too, Aaron, no problem. Where they kind of, every search up until this point was not publicized. It was kept very private. And so the fact that they not only announce that they're doing the search, but they invite the media was kind of like, what the heck is going on? And so then it was just like, I don't know, questionable, I guess. And it turns out that from what I've been able to kind of put together, it was questionable due to the police were specifically using this for a reason. There's an episode of the Cold podcast. Like I said, I listened to all 18 episodes, but there's one called, what's it called? Operation Tsunami is what I believe it's called. And it's what the police ended up calling this situation where they were utilizing the media to try. I'm not exactly sure what their plan was. But that this was specific. Yes, yep. Most factual information on this case is from the Cold podcast. Yep. It was great. All right. So then let us go to the next one. Tuesday, August 23rd, 2011. We have Susan's best friend, Kiersey, which you guys can learn about her on the Susan Cox Powell Foundation. She has a page on there for you to be able to learn more about her. And then Jennifer, which is Josh Powell's sister, who is the only one that kind of got away from the whole mess and did not really associate with her family much. They give an interview in regards to Steve Powell, so Jennifer's father, Susan's father-in-law, and his obsession with Susan. So we already kind of went over that. We've listened to the songs that he wrote for Susan. I gave you guys the overview of kind of what he did while Susan and Josh were living in Steve's house at the beginning of their marriage. But anyways, they reveal they reveal all of the information that I read to you guys earlier, that they just revealed the unwanted sexual advances against Susan, and Steve actually ends up denying all these claims, which proved to be true later on because he literally films himself. So nasty ass. But Thursday, August 25th, 2011, police serve a search warrant on Steve Powell's home. So now they're in Washington, where Josh is living at Steve Powell's house, his father's house, with his other siblings. And the police end up serving a search warrant there. They actually end up doing it both in Utah and Washington at the same time. They end up taking computers, boxes, bags, anything that you could think of that they would potentially take in a situation like this, and taking it all. So then, let's see. We then have Monday, September 12th, 2011. Police begin search at the rock collecting area. So this is the area of the crystals, which if you guys were listening a little bit earlier, the area with the geodes that Josh would bring the boys to then break them open. They called it the place with the crystals. Is also where the boys say mommy stayed after they went camping. And so they begin a search in this specific area. It is near Delta in Utah's West Desert. It's a multi-day search. All right. So now we're going to kind of we're getting to I was going to say the bad part. It's all bad, but you know what I mean. Wednesday, September 14th, 2011, dogs are brought into the search. Police find human remains and recovered charred wood from the area. It does not end up being her. But they do find a burn pile in the area as well. So we then come to Thursday, September 22nd, 2011. This is a big day in this case. And it is Steve Powell, so Josh's father, the one that had the obsession with Susan, is actually arrested on child porn. I can't say the P word at all. YouTube doesn't like that. And voyeurism charges. So, yes. Now, also because of this, they end up finding a ton of child corn in the Powell household when they had served the search warrant. But also just there was a lot of different things. It was children, it was incest, it was anything that you could think of that would make you sick. They found in this guy's house. And due to this and the police not knowing who was aware, they found videos that he had potentially taken himself of young girls, which we do find out are two neighbor girls that he took video of them while they were using the bathroom across in like their neighbor through their bathroom window. He was taking photos of them. But this was the excuse for the police to take Charlie and Braden and put them into the state's custody, which is a good thing. That is a very good thing. Thousands of images of young girls and women, including Susan, dressing and undressing. Photos taken without consent or knowledge, and the two neighbor girls were victims as well. Let's see. Making sure I'm not missing anything. It is then Friday. Let me go to the next one. Friday, September 23rd, 2011. The Cox family files for custody in court. And then 4 days later, Charlie and Braden are placed in the custody of the Coxes. Yeah, Sally Mae. Well, we actually do find out that Josh, they end up serving search warrants and unlocking aspects of his computer and stuff. And you're good, LFT. He was found to have corn as well, but his was animated. But it was animated depicting different bad things. So it would be like child corn, but it would be of children in cartoons, or incest between so on and so forth. So yeah. Okay, so then Cox family so Susan's parents end up getting the boys. Just, as a placeholder, I guess at this point. It's not permanent. But September 28th, the day after, they are officially placed in custody of the Coxes. Once again, not a permanent thing, but semi-permanent for the time being unless something were to change. Let me just make sure. Court, yes. But then on Thursday, November 10th, 2011, Chuck Cox actually files a motion for a guardian to appoint a guardian for Charlie and Braden so that a custody investigation could begin. I'm not exactly sure how that works in the court system, but I would assume it has something to do with the fact that they want the boys to have the ability to be interviewed and such on to the parenting of Josh. And for some reason in their custody or so on, if that could make a difference, I don't know. But that is something that he ends up doing. We then have Monday, November 14th, 2011. The judge sets custody hearing for Charlie and Braden. This is the custody hearing that the Coxes are dreading, and that Josh Powell is anticipating. He is under the impression he's going to be getting his boys back, and so on. So as we continue into this, we're going to be getting to the point where the two young Powell boys do end up losing their lives. So trigger warning into this. But this is an important part of this case. So Tuesday, January 31st, the website created by Josh is disabled by the courts. This is the website of him putting up all the stuff about Susan, their theories of where she was. This is where they were originally going to post her journals, stuff like that. The website ends up being taken down by the courts. Now, Wednesday, February 1st, 2012, a Washington judge allows for the boys to stay with Chuck and Judy Cox and not to go home with Josh. Now, there's footage. I don't know if there's footage of the entire thing. But there is footage of different aspects of this court hearing, and it is very evident that Josh was under the impression that the boys would be going home with him that day. And even after the judge rules that they will not, he still is not understanding to the point where he needs to be told the boys are not coming home with you. And he is visibly and audibly upset about this. There is said to have been an outburst in the court, and that it was something that, like I said, he was not expecting. So, let me just make sure I'm not missing anything from that day before. Oh, hang on. Let's see. All right, Washington State Judge said that at this point in time, guys, Charlie is 7 and Braden is 5. The judge orders during this court hearing as well that that Josh has to get a psychosexual evaluation by a court-appointed examiner. So this is based upon the corn that they found belonging to Josh, as well as, different things. I know the boys had stated, like, we sleep in bed with daddy naked, or Josh's brother who lived at home would answer the door wearing a diaper or naked, and that they were very comfortable because everyone around was naked everywhere in the house, and it was something that was normal to them. And I think that really gave off a lot of red flags. But not only that, but an evaluation previously done on him stated that he had narcissistic personality tendencies, and that one thing that I think is a negative that came out of this day was the fact that Josh was able to prove that he had adequate parenting skills, a steady employment, and no criminal record, resulting in supervised visitation with his son several times a week. So unfortunately, this decision was a deadly decision, and is not what people wanted to hear, and is kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but the thing is everything that I've told you about Josh and his past up until this point was known to the courts. So his history that was in his parents' divorce, about him holding his mother at knife point and killing his sister's gerbils, and his ex-girlfriend, and the way that he treated Susan, the fact that Susan was missing, and like all of this is all in the court records, and they still allowed him to have supervised visitation. Now, supervised visitation you'd think would be okay because someone else has to be there. We will obviously learn as I get into February 5th of 2012 why that was not the case. But also that these supervised visitations were supposed to be occurring not at his home, which I think is also an important part of this, which I actually learned in the Cold podcast in one of the final episodes I listened to today. It was stated that these were supposed to be happening in public places and not at the home of Josh Powell. So, Josh Powell had recently rented a home. Wrong what? What do you mean, Sally Mae? Oh. Yeah, he killed his sister's gerbils and then made her touch the blood when he was a kid. Oh, court was wrong. Yes. Yep. Court was wrong. You are absolutely correct. Okay. So, Sunday, February 5th, 2012, we have social worker Elizabeth Griffin arrives at the house that Josh Powell was renting with Charlie and Braden for their supervised visitation. They get out of the car. The boys run ahead of her. Josh Powell. The boys run into the door. Josh makes direct eye contact with Elizabeth Griffin, the social worker. Stares at her and then closes the door with the boys inside and her outside. He quickly slams the door. She is fighting to get inside, and she ends up calling. Yes, trigger warning. She ends up calling 911. That 911 call has been released. I am going to play it for you guys. This has also caused a lot of controversy because the 911 operator did not take this seriously. Now, I've heard that 911 operator was reprimanded for the way that they handled this case and has since started training to avoid situations like this from happening again. And after this case, the Elizabeth Griffin, the social worker included in this case specifically, had stopped from doing cases like this due to the trauma and everything. So she ends up going back to her car and calling 911, which I will play for you guys here. And hang on, let me grab it. But unfortunately, while she's on the phone with 911, she states she smells gasoline. And then while on the phone, the house explodes. Hang on, we're going to see if this wants to work. Maybe. What the heck? Give me a second. I've been doing this too long, so now my computer wants to be slow. Okay. Why does YouTube do that now? It's the most annoying thing. We will be listening. Hang on, I gotta restart it, but...
Washington State now, where police have released chilling 911 tapes from the day Josh Powell killed his 2 sons and himself. The call...
I'm on a supervised visitation for a court-ordered visit, and something really weird has happened. I'm really shocked, and I could hear one of the kids crying, but he still wouldn't let me in.
Desperate for help and sensing danger, social worker Elizabeth Griffin Hall pleads with a 911 operator to send someone quickly.
And I'd like to pull out of the driveway because I smell gasoline, and he won't let me in.
Inside the house, Josh Powell is brutally attacking his children, while a frustrated Griffin Hall waits helplessly for authorities to arrive.
Okay, how long will it be?
I don't know, ma'am. They have to respond to emergency, life-threatening situations first.
This could be life-threatening. He went to court on Wednesday, and he didn't get his kids back. And this is really, I'm afraid for their lives.
Moments later, Powell torches the home as an explosion rocks the neighborhood.
It exploded the house.
Ma'am,
yeah,
you know
he exploded the house. He blew up the house and the kids.
The kid and the father were in the house?
Yeah, yes, he slammed the door in my face. So I kept knocking. I thought it was a mistake. I kept knocking, and then I called 911.
Powell's sister also calls 911 after getting an email from Josh Powell.
He said something about he can't live without his sons, and I'm not afraid of him. He'd never hurt me. I'm afraid of seeing something. I don't want to see it.
Yet as she spoke, Josh Powell and his 2 sons had already perished in the fire.
All right. So once again, I will have that if you guys do want to re-listen to that or listen to it more carefully. I will have it linked down below. But as you guys can hear while she's on the phone with 911, the house ends up exploding and going into a huge fiery mess. And she's literally just sitting there and at first was like, no, the police need to get here. And unfortunately, they did not get there in time. We do learn a little bit more regarding the deaths. Such as, hang on, I gotta figure out where I was on my timeline overlays. Were we here? Yeah, we were past that. Oh, I think we were here. There we go. So we find out that, hang on, let me see if this is the right one. Here we go. The results of the boys' autopsies. Now, this is something that it's worse than you think it is. Sorry, I'm sucks. But we do find out that all three of them end up dying of smoke inhalation from the fires. Now, that would suck altogether. But one aspect of this that we find out after the fact is that before Josh Powell set the fire off, he took a hatchet to the boys' head and necks. So he had tried to kill them prior to starting the fire with a hatchet to their heads and necks. Trigger warning. And then they still ended up dying of smoke inhalation, which means that they lived after that. So that is the aspect of this that it's not fun to talk about at all, but it also goes into the thought process and everything in regards to where Josh, wherever the hell his mind was. So then, sorry guys, I'm trying to figure out. They end up finding 2 5-gallon cans of gasoline on the premises, as well as evidence of the gasoline being spread throughout the home, which then obviously brought in the plan of premeditation. We also end up finding out that Josh Powell, prior to the boys showing up, had sent a number of emails and voicemails to his friends and loved ones in work saying goodbye, which you guys did hear at the end of that news clip in regards to his sister Alina. She was actually sent an email from Josh in regards to how to handle his assets and such after his death. So that is the second call that you guys heard, was her calling after she received those emails. So I am going to back up just a little bit because it then goes into Steve. So Steve Powell, Josh's father, is in jail for, he's being held until his trial for the child. Well, technically the child porn got thrown out due to a way that the courts had written the laws and child porn. He didn't technically produce any or wasn't telling someone how to do it and such. But so he still was in jail though on the voyeurism charges, which is the taking of the photos of the underage girls through their bathroom window. Yeah, right, sweet Melissa. And it's good to see you. Thanks for coming. But the police or the workers at the jail that Steve Powell was in, they end up telling him about the deaths of his son and his grandsons, and he is very unconcerned. He kind of didn't really care. But like, who's Anna? What do you mean, Avery? You mean Alina? Is Josh Powell's sister. Right, K-Braze? Yeah, I agree. But he's very unconcerned, and then he actually ends up getting angry with the people that tell him, not necessarily about the deaths, but just that they're bothering him. So that was how he had taken those. those deaths. 2 weeks later, Steve Powell officially in court records invokes his Fifth Amendment right to not answer any questions about Susan's case. I'm assuming it is his right to not incriminating himself. Because there's different aspects of the Fifth Amendment, but I'm sure that that's the aspect that he's talking about. But there are many people who believe that he knows what happened to Susan. I believe now, in hindsight, people don't believe. Oh, gotcha, Avery. I don't believe people think that Steve Powell partook in any of it. But that he was aware of what had occurred. So yeah. All right. So now we are going to kind of go to the aftermath. We're back to the timeline a little, but we're almost done with the timeline. And then at the very end, I am going to show you guys the memorials for Susan and the boys, as well as some pictures of Susan and the boys. And let me just see. I'm also going to be going over the impact that Susan and her boys' case has had up till this day. Yes, set it in motion, yeah. So July 3rd, 2020 or 2012, a mine explorer went to the mines, obviously, because that's what a mine explorer does, and found a mine that had been like stuff thrown into it and then burned. And it was in a similar area to where the police would have potentially thought that Susan was. So that was an interesting find, but I don't think safety wise they were ever able to like get a ton out of it. It was 30 miles west of where Josh Powell had claimed that he went camping with the boys, and it had been filled up with gasoline and burned, which also comes into account was Josh's conversation with a previous coworker at a previous job, and about how Josh had told someone at a coworker at a previous job, in quotes, the best place to dispose of a body is down a mine shaft. So he's dead, Anna. So I'll get into that as well. Probably, but this is the most in-depth one, Red Eye. So now we get into let's see. The Friday, October 12th. Oh wait, let me see. Actually, also around between in the summer of 2012 there was also the Salt Lake Tribune obtained Susan's emails that she had been sending people all the way back to a year prior to her disappearance. And some of the quotes was just, he's usually rude, yelling and barking commands at me, and so on and so forth. We then have Friday, October 12th, reports come out. So there's just, okay. So now we bring in Michael Powell. So if you guys remember, Michael Powell is Joshua Powell's brother. And there is there is, I don't even know how to explain this. So the police end up getting a call from a woman who works at a satellite photo taking service, I think is how this should have, or how it was stated, of a call from Michael Powell in regards to him trying to get a snapshot of a satellite image from a certain date in a certain area. At the time, they did not have a picture of this, and it was kind of blown over. Eventually, this person ends up getting in touch with police. The police kind of say, hey, would you do us a favor and kind of work with us? We want to figure out, what he was looking for in this satellite snapshot. So they end up setting up a thing with, the police to reach back out to Michael Powell, who at this time was going to grad school in Minneapolis, so here in Minneapolis at the U of M. And she calls and she's like, hey, I know you had reached out to see if we had gotten new images. Well, it turns out we were able to get images, but I need to figure out the address exactly so I can make sure, blah, blah, blah. Well, it ends up being a junkyard in Oregon, I believe. And it turns out that the police ended up going to this junkyard and finding Michael Powell's vehicle. He had paid $100 to get it scrapped, to have them get rid of it. And when it was it in Idaho, Red Rock? Are you sure? Hi, Tia. Well, regardless, he asks for this so that he can check and see if this car is still on the premises or if it had been disposed of, which is what he had paid them to do. Unfortunately, him calling to get this is what kind of set the police off to be able to go find it. They were able to find that it, for the most part, was actually still intact, and they were able to confiscate it. Now, one aspect of this is that they did bring dogs around this truck, cadaver dogs, and they did hit 2 human remains in the trunk of his car. So a lot of people believe, allegedly, that Michael Powell had a direct connection to either, not necessarily what happened to Susan, but the disposal of her body. And so at this point in time, the police had gone and interviewed Michael in Minneapolis, and everything along those lines. And then they end up saying, hey, actually, we found your car. And he is in shock and obviously is terrified, to the point where on Monday, February 11th, 2013, he drives to the 7th level of a car parking garage in Minneapolis, parks his car, smokes a cigarette, and jumps off. So he kills himself by jumping off of the parking structure here in Minneapolis. Now, at this point in time now, Susan is still missing. Josh is deceased. Michael is deceased. And Steve Powell is in jail. Yeah. He and his sister had broken down there on a trip from Washington to Utah. Yeah. And then instead, that's what he claimed happened. And then he claimed that it was just cost too much, so they just had it towed there to get rid of. But there's a lot of questions surrounding that. So like I said, that was February 11th, 2013. The police had come and questioned him a handful of times in Minneapolis. They had his car, which had tested positive for human remains in the vehicle, in the trunk. I believe there was hair that was found as well. But I believe the hair did not end up being Susan's hair. But I don't know what else was potentially found in there. So yeah. And then we have Tuesday, May 14th, 2013. The West Valley City Police Department searched for Susan's body in Salem. Now, based on the podcast that I was listening to, this had to do with an uncle or something like that, had a house there, that they would go visit, like Steve and the boys, Josh and the family would go stay with occasionally and so on. And that's kind of why that was up why they went and searched there. But obviously, nothing was found once again. All right, we're getting there, guys. We're getting there. No, Avery, she's still missing. So let's see. Also, Monday, July 1st, 2013, the West Valley City Police Department announced the end to the active phase of their search for Susan at a press conference. We also have Tuesday, May 21st, 2013. The Cox family is given control via the courts of Susan's estate. Monday, July 1st, 2013. There we go, that one. And then July 13th, 2015, the court case finally goes in, and the jury finds Steve Powell guilty of the voyeurism charges. Where do you think they went, Red Rock? I'm curious. I don't think so either. I think they were moved with them. I know. Thanks, Norris Grandma. I tried really hard. I actually thought about it a lot while I was making these overlays. So the jury finds him guilty on July 13th, 2015. And this was of the voyeurism charges of the neighbors, which at the time of these photos being taken, they were ages 8 and 10 from his bedroom window in 2006 and 2007. Of them utilizing the restroom in their own house. So he was taking it from his window through his neighbor's window of the 8 and 10-year-old girls in the bathroom. It is then stated that he is sentenced to 5 years. So on. There was a lot of back and forth in regards to whether he was going to be charged with the child porn or if it was just going to be the voyeurism. Then one court would say, no, you can't be charged in this. And then another one would say, yes, you can be charged with this. And then it was kind of back and forth between, superior courts and the other courts and everything like that. Good night, Aaron. There was a lot to it. Regardless, he ends up being sentenced to 5 years in prison, but is given credit for 17 months already served. North in a rental car from there, not sure. What do you think he was doing in those 800 miles, Red Rock, when Josh Powell rented the car? Curious. So then we're going to get to October 6th, 2015. Federal court in Washington State dismisses the Cox lawsuit, stating that DSHS, so the social workers, didn't do enough to protect the boys. So obviously the Cox family sued Protective Services as well as the social workers involved, saying that they didn't protect the boys. I know. But then also in 2014, a judge had refused to toss out the lawsuit. And then October 26th, 2017, the West Valley City Police Department announced a computer of Josh's that was seized is still locked. That the amount of encryption on this computer was something that even their specialists have not been able to crack until this day is still locked. Which I do think is interesting. Through their window, because technically it was just the voyeurism charges, not the child porn charges. Now, well, it even gets a little bit worse than that, because on Tuesday, July 11th, 2017, Steve Powell is released from prison. I've heard that he was just released early because of time served, or if it was good behavior. There's kind of a lot when it comes to the courts and the back and forth when it comes to Steve being in jail, Steve getting out of jail, what he was charged with, how long he was supposed to be in, so on, as well as the Cox family lawsuit. So there's kind of a lot there. We then go to almost just over a year later, Monday, July 23rd, 2018, Steve Powell dies in Tacoma, Washington. So he's only out of jail for a little over a year. He was very silent during this time. He never talked about the case to anyone in the public. Alina had, I think it was Alina, might have been Jennifer, had done an interview, stating that he just didn't talk to them at all, anything like that. Now this whole Steve dying in the hospital, he died in the hospital in Tacoma. There were actually detectives that didn't know he was in the hospital, and then when they found out, and they were like, well, we need to talk to him then, and they're like, no, he's getting better, he's recovering. And then 2 days later, they call again to get the update of hey, can you let us know when he's released? And they're like, oh, sorry, he died. So the police never actually got to talk to him on his deathbed or anything like that. So that was a point of contention as well, because the doctors had said Steve was recovering well and at first, and then they decided not to go up to interview him. And then he ends up dying. Now I wasn't able to find it anywhere how he died, but then when I was listening to the Cold podcast, I was able to find that it was heart failure. So I don't know exactly. Tuesday, July 24th, 2018, Jennifer Graves, which is the estranged sister of Josh Powell, the one that got away, does an interview about her father's death. She kind of just goes over the whole, I'm not necessarily sad that he's dead, but I'm sad that he lived the life that he lived, or what. I'm not exactly sure. Just kind of, like I said, going along the lines of, I'm not sad that he's dead, but Red Rock, I don't think so either. I don't think he would have talked either, even on his deathbed. Nope. Mostly because I don't necessarily think he did anything wrong. I don't think he thinks he did anything wrong. You know what I mean? Okay, so then let us see. We then have Friday, July 27th, 2018. Chuck Cox wants access to the West Valley City Police Department files, unredacted versions. Wednesday, January 2nd, 2019, Utah's Cold Case Coalition report that they got a tip that some mines in Utah's West Desert had not been searched thoroughly or at all, which I'm sure there's a hell of a lot of mines there, so I don't know, but it's just interesting. That was one of the aspects of this that brought up. And then we have Thursday, January 10th, 2019, United States Courts of Appeal for the Ninth Circuit rules that the Cox family can sue DSHS, overruling a lower court's decision to not allow them to, although they are upholding the ruling that the social workers are immune. So the courts have now decided that the Cox family can sue protective services, but they cannot sue the social workers individually. And based on my readings, it had something to do with the fact of social workers need to be able to work without the fear of repercussions. And so they're immune as singular people in situations like this. We then have Friday, December 6th, 2019, which was the 10-year anniversary of Susan's disappearance. And then, let me see. This is my last one here. 2020, the Cox civil case actually is reconvened, which is surprising because in 2020, everything seemed to stop. But I never did the math to see how far they could have taken her, but she could be anywhere in any direction if they can't correct the phone. We'll never know. Yeah? I don't know. Well, it depends on how they got rid of her as well. Apparently Josh liked fire, and that's not a good sign when we're trying to find a body somewhere. But the family is awarded in this civil suit against DSHS $98.5 million. The judge actually ends up changing it from 98.5 to $32 million, stating $16 million for Charlie and $16 million for Braden. I believe that since then it has been reinstated as the 98.5 million. That has been back to being updated. Yeah. So now I'm going to show you guys the memorials. There is a cenotaph. Is that how you say that? I was trying to practice it, but in Susan's honor at the Woodbine Cemetery in Washington. I'm going to show you guys that. I'm going to read the inscription on the back of it as well. And then there is a gravestone of the boys, and I believe they also bought the gravestone next to the plot next to the boys as well, so that Susan could be placed with the boys when she is found. So these here, if you guys see this says Angel of Hope. There's a vigil every year in her memory that is located here. And it says, the Christmas Box Angel Monument has been provided by the community on behalf of Susan, Charlie, and Braden Powell. It is dedicated as a place of love and healing for all those who have suffered the loss of a child. We invite all to leave a white flower at the base of the monument in memory of their loved one. We invite you to gather here December 6th at 7 p.m. each year for a candlelight vigil to remember our children who have been taken back to their heavenly home. And as you guys can see here, right here, in the center there, it also has the Charlie, Braden, and then as you can see, it also says Susan and it just says missing at the bottom, which this Angel of Hope is, I believe it's only up a hill from this gravestone. So, and then I have two more slides here. Next one is just pictures of Susan and the boys. Just because in this, it is about Susan, Charlie, and Braden. As you guys can see, she looks very happy. And like they had said, it was one of her favorite things ever was being a mom. So, the last slide here, once again, guys, Susan Powell is still missing. She has not been found. She was last seen December 7, 2009 at 6254 Sarah Circle, West Valley City, Utah. She's female, 5'4", 130 pounds, blue eyes, brown hair. Any info, please contact the West Valley City Police Department at 801-840-4000. There's also a $10,000 reward for info leading to finding Susan. So that is my presentation on this. I know, thank you guys for sticking it out with me and allowing me to tell you guys Susan's story. I will say, like I said, they have the Susan Cox Powell Foundation that was there, and I am going to be making, like I said, a donation here after I end out the live, and I'll post it on the community post, and it's going to be from not only me, but you guys as well, because I wouldn't be able to make the donation without you. And then there was also the Charlie Braden Act, where it is stating that children who have a missing or murdered parent, custodial guardian, and the other custodial guardian is in question of being the reason that the other parent is missing, that it should stop the custody from going to the potential person of interest or suspect. That has not made it all the way through yet, but I will keep you guys updated if I hear anything. Once again, all of my resources and everything that I utilized to create this presentation for you guys will be linked down below. Give me a little bit. It's not linked down there quite yet. But it will be. I have to get a little bit of food before I come back and sit down. But yeah. So once again, guys, unfortunately, this is another case where domestic violence is an issue. You guys know that this is domestic violence, and stopping domestic violence is something I'm very passionate about. And I hope that you guys will keep Susan and the boys in your mind and your hearts. And just know that you're not alone, and there are people that want to help. And if you see yourself being in a situation like this, whether it be, I'm trying to remember the exact verbiage of what the podcast at the end of the podcast said was, if you find yourself in a situation where you're being emotionally, physically, financially abused, that there are people that can help you and there are resources. I always list domestic violence resources in my description down below. And then at the end of the live here, I will be playing the outro with the domestic violence hotline on it. So, once again, thank you guys so much for listening to Susan's case, Charlie and Braden as well. This is a case that has taught a lot of people a lot of very hard lessons, but it's something that I think has made a huge difference. Now you're oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Red Rock. I really do appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thanks, guys. Make sure to stay kind and keep an eye out for that donation on my community page. So, but other than that, I'll see you guys next week. And yeah, stay kind, everyone. Bye.